Okay, hello again, everyone. Um, we're excited to wrap up the conference with our Southwest Grower panel. And if all of our Southwest growers could turn on your camera, that would be great. Thank you. So yes, our panel includes growers representing different scales and different approaches to native seed production, and coming from different states as well. Just, we wouldn't have a partnership without our growers, so they're very important to us. As you listen to our grower panel, please consider some of the challenges and benefits of growing local sources and diverse species and diverse genetics. For example, one challenge is that these crops are not uniform like traditional agricultural crops, which means that seed set and harvest time could be variable. And one of the benefits is improved soil health. So the purpose of this panel is to gain a better understanding of what it takes to grow native seeds and how we can support our native seed industry here in the Southwest. And looking at farmers at different scales. This is a chance for seed users or seed buyers to meet the people who are providing that seed and possibly discover a grower you did not know about previously. So we're going to start with each of the growers introducing themselves, similar to the Northwest session, and sharing some information about their farm. And then after all 5 growers have presented, we'll move on to the Q&A. So we will kick off the introductions with Granite Seed. Tren, if you'd like to turn on your camera and your mic.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Tren Hagman with Granite Seed. We've got 3 different distribution locations for Granite Seed in Lehigh, Utah, Denver, Colorado, and Tempe, Arizona. And then our farms we have farms in Montana, Washington, and then a small farm in Mexico that we do most of our Southwest production. And then we also do collections, wildland collections through all of the Western states, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, Idaho, and Montana. We have right around 4,000 acres of production between the 3 farms. And on those 3 farms, we're dealing with about 100 species, mostly grasses, but we do have right around 20 forbs in production on those farms. And our collections are usually targeting shrubs and forbs for wildland harvest. So yeah, I mean, I'd say overall we're a large production facility, except for our 1 farm. And most of these pictures are from our smaller farm with the Southwest production. So I don't say, as far as niche, I think we kind of cover everything. We'll deal with homeowners and then up to large scale projects and government agencies.
Great, thank you so much, Tren. Brett, would you like to go next for Bamert?
Absolutely, thank you. So I'm Brett Bamert with Bamert Seed Company. We're in Millshoe, Texas, been in business since 1951. We produce most of our seed predominantly in 2 locations here in the Texas Panhandle. We also have 2 other locations that we produce seed in the East Texas and Central Texas. But everything for the Southwest we produce here in Millshoe or right around Amarillo. We produce about 100 different varieties, species, and collections, anywhere from half an acre up to 250 acres for 1 production field. So I would we try to specialize and be good at both. We've had some things happen over the years that helped us to continue to focus on producing more diversity when possible. So, but we've been in business since 51, 100 varieties. Let's see what else I forgot here. Kind of our niche, we sell, our customers are as diverse as our seed is, from the oil and gas industry, renewables, solar, wind, DOT projects, mining, wildlife, CRP, and pollinator projects. So there's really nobody that we don't touch in our kind of area of influence. So we appreciate you having us here today, and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Brett. Francesca, would you like to go next for Borderlands?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. My name is Francesca Claverie. I'm the Native Plant Program Manager for Borderlands Restoration Network. And I'm here joined by Travis Gerkins, who's our farm manager. We're based in Patagonia, Arizona, and we have a seed collection lab and a nursery. And we're here today to talk about our grow out fields that we've been working on for the past 3 years. We have about an acre under production at this point, and part of that is grown out through contracts with the Institute for Applied Ecology. We have a few species with Petrified Forests National Park, and then we have a little section that we grow out species for our commercial productions, mostly seed packet scale that we sell online. And then we also partner locally with a flower farmer who uses a few rows for cut sunflowers, which just makes the whole farm really, really pretty. We grow a total of about 10 different species on this plot, in this 1 acre plot. And we're really looking to expand in the coming years because we have access to more land and hopefully can add a lot more species.
Great, thank you so much, Francesca. Paul, would you like to go next for Mandy's farm?
Sure, sounds great. Hey everyone, my name is Paul Ross. What a pleasure to be here with some pretty rad growers. I'm looking forward to learning some things. I've worked with IAE for 3 years now, a different hat each year. The hat I'm currently wearing is the Farming Apprenticeship and Agribility Manager for a nonprofit called Mandy's Farm. But I've also grown seed for IAE as an independent contractor, and working a little bit with another restoration nonprofit, Rio Grande Return. All of this has been based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and being so close to Santa Fe and the Southwestern Seed Partnership has let me do a lot of small scale and kind of hands-on tinkering with different growing techniques, different species. And right now, I think over the course of our partnership, we've worked with about 10 different species with IE. And right now we're doing some trials to do some overwintered seeding to see how that works with breaking dormancy. I also, in terms of niche, there's, I work with pretty small scale, and that kind of puts us out of the large restoration materials that some of these other folks are working with, but something that I think collaborating with other nonprofits like Mandy's Farm or Borderlands Restoration Network allows kind of the cultural aspect of growing native seed to become a little more prioritized, and getting people to form relationships with native plants, especially people who are historically left out of major decisions around their environment and their landscape is a really cool opportunity that I have the opportunity to work with. So looking forward to hearing how everyone else approaches all the pieces of growing seed.
Great, thanks so much. And last but not least, Justin with Fieldhouse Farms.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Justin Brereton with Fieldhouse Farms, and I'm starting in my second year as grower with IAE. Is my volume working fine?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm a small farm, so I currently grow 3 species for seed production, and I was looking to get my home-based farm kick-started with growing, and this was a natural fit with IAE. So the 3 species that I'm growing this year was they had a list of species. I took on some that I knew and I had experience with before. I'm growing Bouteloa gracilis, which is blue grama, the Elamis elamoides squirrel tail, and Achillea millefolium yarrow. So as you can see, some species that would do well in my area. I am in Chino Valley, Arizona at 4,800 feet elevation. And this is my home-based business. So my actual home and my family is just out of sight there, which makes it convenient for labor and inconvenient for many other things like a home-based business would be. The property is 5 acres, and as far as size goes, I mentioned quite a few times small. I am a faculty instructor, a horticulture instructor at our local community college, so this is a secondary hat that I'm wearing. So I wanted to make sure that I could do a good job first with what I said I could do, and then expand and go from there. And that's maybe still up in the air what kind of job I'm doing, so I'll wait to hear. They asked me to speak, so that's a good thing. I am starting small, as I mentioned, and our niche, my niche would be, upland arid climate natives. And in this specific project, the seed is going to our local national forest. So we're choosing some species that have a wide range, but we're hoping to get very original, unique, endemic varieties for the area and getting them right back into areas that need restored. So that's me, and I'll talk more to you in a little bit.
Great. Well, thank you, grower panel, for introducing yourselves and your farms. Now's the time where we get to do the question and answer, and keep those questions coming, everyone. I know it's the end of the day after the end of the conference, but keep the questions coming, and I'll be looking at the Q&A now, but I would like to start with a question that I always like to ask of growers, and I'll direct this correct question to Brett and Tren, and that is, what would you like seed buyers to know? Brett, would you like to go first?
Sure. It's really exciting for me, I guess, to be here today because, I think, we all have the same idea. We want to affect positive change to the landscape, to our industry. And, I guess being in the native seed business, one thing I've kind of come to realize, and it's frustrating a lot of times, is that the seed companies don't get brought in until the end, when a contractor needs to purchase seed. And so I don't know how many listening or watching today, have some sort of role in, speccing projects or involved in projects before they get started. But it seems like often that specs get put in that, the market is, it doesn't, that some of the seeds not available, or is not available, has never been available. And so to bring those seed companies in earlier, whoever your preferred vendor is, and, bring them into that conversation to help develop those specs so that when the project gets going and it's getting bid out, you don't have, 15 different substitution lists come back in. And so, because depending on the conversation that contractor has with that seed company is going to dictate what that blend looks like. And a lot of times they say, hey, I just need the cheapest stuff. And, and that's not what anybody here wants. And so, I would encourage everybody here today to bring in the seed companies earlier on and let us help you. I mean, we do this for a living, and we're here to help make you and your project successful. So, if there's one message to leave everybody here with today, I want them to know that that's what we're here to do.
Great, thanks, Brett. And Tren, do you want to respond to that as well?
Yeah. I mean, I'd agree with Brett. Bring us in early and we can adapt. I mean, that'd probably be what I would add to this, is that us as an industry, we're here to help and we can adapt. We might be used to carrying species that we've been carrying, but we're open to grow and try new things. And we've learned hard lessons that I'm sure all of you have learned along the way with trying to grow these things. So the earlier you bring us in, and the better, like Brett was saying, but then also don't be afraid to ask us to try something, because we'll try it. We're farmers, so we're just glutton for punishment.
Great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and go to the Q&A now. And right now, the top question is, can you all talk about pros and cons of being a nonprofit grower compared to for-profit businesses, small or large? And why don't you start, Francesca, talking about it from the nonprofit grower side of things? Or I guess, are you guys nonprofit, or are you?
We're a nonprofit.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd say one of the pros for us as a nonprofit is that we as the growers have the flexibility within our organization to make priorities about what we want to grow within reason for our newer commercial grow outs. Something that we have struggled with that we constantly think about is having like investors to really be able to put money into equipment and being able to take some risks without jeopardizing our entire budget for our native plant program. So that's something that we think about a lot, where we're like, oh, if we could have investors, because we see this as a great opportunity that we can really expand upon. And at this point, we spend a lot of time writing grants to get these different projects off the ground. And as we think about taking on more land and putting more seed into production with plugs to put into the fields to be able to take on more acreage, for us looking at our budget with a nursery and some seed retail projects, that like the farm gets a little bit left behind in that. So I would love to be able to see the farm as its own entity that investors could put some money in. But overall, as the nonprofit and with all our combined other projects within the native plant program, it makes that's why one of the reasons why we're even growing is because we have this vision that's a little broader, that does a lot of wild collection, and the nursery grow outs and the farm work makes sense. And I don't think we would have been able to diversify as much if we weren't a nonprofit. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Justin, do you want to say anything about your sort of model and the pros and cons of your model?
Yeah, I think I'll skip because I'm just still learning to see if if there is any profit margin in what I'm doing. So right now I'm considering myself nonprofit, but as I was scrolling ahead in the questions, I see there's lots of questions about irrigation and stuff. So I'll wait and talk more about those things.
Great. Paul, did you want to chime in, or?
Sure. I think, from my time with working as an independent contractor and then with Rio Grande Return, we experienced a lot of the same kind of budgetary, mostly cons that Francesca was mentioning. But something that I'm really excited about our current collaboration at working as a nonprofit, that most of our work is centered outside of horticulture or native plant materials, but being able to intersect that with your work at the Institute for Applied Ecology, and hopefully other restorationists and conservationists out there as well, is the opportunities for kind of stacking funding between both of those missions. So right now, there's lots of state and federal funding available for the programs that we run at Mandy's Farm, and connecting those with native plant growing and all kinds of other time outside really strengthens the work that we do. And so currently I'm in a position where I am not, like, my own livelihood isn't tied at all to the success of a single year of growing seed, which is a really unique place to be as a farmer. And there's plenty of other challenges in terms of setting up collaborations between organizations, all the bureaucracy you have to jump through, but that's a really unique opportunity for partnering with organizations that you can start to diversify where both your missions and where your funding comes from.
Thanks, Paul. Tren is a larger scale commercial producer. Do you have any comments about pros and cons?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say pros for us would be that we kind of have that leeway where we can try different things. And if it is a failure, it's easier on us, where I can, some of the smaller producers, it's harder for them to try it, because a failure could, put them under in some cases, where we kind of have that leeway. And I guess cons would be just maybe a perception issue in the industry, that we're not, willing to delve into this, to the more local source materials, where that's so. I mean, part of why we do things like this is just to show that we agree with the whole local stuff, and we're all for trying to grow it and produce it. So I'd say those are kind of the two ones that jumped out to me.
Thank you. Would you like to add anything, Brett?
Oh, yeah, I'll kind of second a little bit what Tren said. And as far as, the misconception in the industry that we're not doing it, because I think if anybody would come out and look at any of these production farms, I think they would realize pretty quick that, wow, there's a lot more to this going on than what anybody realizes. And so, yeah, we are here to support the industry and help make everybody successful. It's just, it's tough, because at the end of the day, I know somebody mentioned having investors. We don't necessarily have investors. Our investor is that customer that's going to buy seed today, that's going to pay for that project and that new 1 acre production field that we're going to put in. And so I guess a disadvantage from my side is, we can't ever lose sight as a private industry that it's our customers that ultimately are paying to help progress the industry, because without those existing customers, we won't have the budget to do what we need to do. So I guess maybe the answer to maybe part of that question is, we just need more customers so that we can get more diversity. So
Well, there was 300 possible customers on the
all right.
conference today.
Fantastic.
Great. Well, thanks all of you. Here's a question from Robert Pellant. Could someone share at least some rough numbers on investment cost per acre, minimum net profit sought per acre if you are a small farm grower for a group like IAE? Honestly, our seeds we produce are very valuable to us, but short of a few small clients, including the Fish and Wildlife Service, there are a number of species for which we'd find it difficult to give away. Who would like to tackle that one first? And I know that there's some proprietariness to some of this information as well, but whatever you can share.
I'm happy to go first.
Thanks.
Yes. So when we're planning out our acreages, and are asking, when we get interest in someone wanting us to grow out a species, we usually will quote somewhere within $10,000 to $15,000 per acre to get the species going. And usually with most of our recent interest, like we now have a little quail plot of Hopia obtusa and some oxalis going in for a project, and we did like $12,000 an acre quote. And it really depends on what the purchaser wants, where they're sourcing the seed. It ends up being totally different. If they want us to go out and do a wild collection of seed, then takes a lot of time and is a lot more cost initially. Often the contractors like Institute for Applied Ecology and our PFO contract came to us with seed that they had already collected, which works out wonderful for us. And then our costs are figuring out if we're going to direct sow or if we're going to do plugs. and how much, working out about how much that would cost. We have found so far with our fields, because we're mostly dealing with perennial forbs and grasses, that at first initial year, when you're not able to harvest a lot yet, but you have a lot of tending to do and a lot of irrigation, that's always the trickiest, the most amount of labor that ends up going into making sure that these plants survive. But as a nonprofit, we don't worry so much about getting a net profit per acre. We're not running those numbers. We're making sure that we can pay everyone on our staff's time to do it. And then at what point we have to put out a big call for volunteers to help with something. But that's usually our initial. We'll look like it ends up being between 10 and 15,000, depending on where they're sourcing the plant material from. Yeah, ends up being how it goes. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks. Anyone else want to jump in? All right, well, that was a good overview, Francesca. Thank you so much. And then the next question is, what is the typical weed management practice for the small growers, especially those who this is a second job? And I'm gonna put that to Justin because he said he wanted those kinds of questions.
Yeah, I can handle that because I thought about weeds for a whole long time before I said yes to doing this. So my process on my farm, my land was former farmland, and so it had been fallow for many years. And so you could imagine I was stuck with invasives. Everything that was growing on my property was a non-native. And so I was already going through the process to see what I could be covering my land with and how I could be managing getting back to something normal. This was a natural fit to start bringing in some natives and such. So I took some drastic measures. I took some natural measures. I actually did cultivation because a lot of my species were winter time. When I started prepping my soil, I did cultivation in the winter and then watered and brought up a lot of my early spring cool season annuals. And then I went ahead and cultivated them off. And I knew that wasn't enough, but it at least was a good start. And then I let my warm season strong perennials. We have field bindweed in our area, and it grows with a huge tuber underground. Probably everybody in the Southwest has some experience with field bindweed, and I knew it was going to make or break my operation. So those species, I got them going, and then I actually terminated them with chemical spray, a translocated spray to get down to the roots to kill. And I actually had to do that twice. I cultivated again, and then I also did use a pre-emergent pre-plant for my field. So I know a lot of people, you can have opinions about what to do, and those were the decisions I made and what I did on my farm. And then I continue to do hand cultivation in between rows with hula hoe and such. And apparently I did my plant spacing really, really tight as compared to what other growers would do. And so at some point I'm going to be suppressing weeds just by my native plants taking over. But I've continued to spot spray, hula hoe, and because I'm watering with drip tape, it makes it very efficient. I'm not encouraging the weeds to grow where they shouldn't be growing, and I'm just encouraging the natives for the most part, except we actually had rain this year, rain and snow. So it was a little bit of a different year, but that's my weed management strategy so far.
Thanks. Brett, would you be willing to share some of your integrated pest management techniques? Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it kind of depends a lot, I guess, on the field size. Our smaller production fields, less than probably 10 or 15 acres, we usually will start with a pre-emergent herbicide just to try to prevent any weeds from coming up. And then after that, we might have a post-emergence application, but really that's pretty short term. There might be one application in there you could get before it starts dinging your seed yield. And so really, it is a lot of manual hoeing. We've got crews, about 20 guys that stay out here most of the summer, just roguing all these fields. And so that's what we use as much as anything. So
Thanks. Anyone else want to chime in with some of your techniques?
Sure. I'll just add that we've had some really good success on the small scale, an acre and under with weed fabric. And it has some cons too, both environmentally, cost wise, and in terms of the labor to put it out. But in terms of really narrowing the space that you need to worry about weeds coming up, it's really amazing, especially in the Southwest. That black surface solarizes weed seeds germinating underneath it really efficiently. And if you get pretty practiced with a torch, you can get really tight spacing on the holes, and have custom spaces set up for plugs and or direct sowing. So that's I found that a pretty good strategy, especially on the smaller side. I'm sure 250 acres of weed cloth would break anyone's bank, but on the smaller side, it's a pretty effective technique as well.
Thanks for adding that.
Melanie, I might add one more thing if you don't mind too. The best prevention for weed problems is to start with a clean field. And so that is one thing that we do and focus a lot on. You'd think that we could just go plant a production field of native grasses or forbs or whatever. But what we'll typically do is we'll grow some sort of agronomic row crop on that acre for about 2 or 3 years, and get that seed bed really clean before we put it in the native grass, or a forb.
All right. The next question is, are there any particular species that gave you a lot of trouble to grow, and why? Why don't we start with Tren?
Sure. Just about any forb that we've tried has given us fits. I don't know that there's any specific ones. We've tried some penstemons that look really good, and then the seed set just isn't there. Really it's forbs kind of overall in general we've had issues with. Grasses are hit or miss, but a lot easier than the forbs have been for us. So there's not a specific one in mind, other than we did do some poppies, looked real good and actually produced good, but it took some figuring out how to get the seed in the bag. A lot of it ended up on the ground.
Anyone else want to chime in on species that you've had a lot of trouble growing?
Yeah, I'll say I grew Elamis. This is Justin, and it was Elamis elamoides, and I agonized over it because my other 2 species were warm season species, and I knew how to do that, and I knew what the seasonality was. But a cool season grass for me, I agonized because I have a frozen season and a burning hot season, and I have a cool season for like maybe a month if I'm lucky, spring and fall. So I really messed it up. To the plant's sake, everything I tried worked, but I just kept overthinking it. I tried to do my plug production during the cool season to get it up and germinate, but then I was left with mature plugs ready to go into the field when it was hot and dry. And so I really experimented a lot, and my experiments kind of overlapped one another, and I wasn't doing a true it wasn't a put them out in the heat and go for it. I was afraid of killing them all. And so I put out like one row of Elemis and I held the others, and it backfired. The plants I put out they did fine and they did well, and I had supplemental irrigation. The plants I tried to hold got too moist in the plug stage because you have to water them a lot, and the greenhouse environment led to just a lot of melting out, and the plants grew really fast, and they actually tried to seed in the plug stage. And so I should have just treated the plant like a native plant and got it out there and hoped for the best, but I was worried it being my first time and all. So the Elemis gave me trouble, but next time I've learned to just get them out there and let them do their thing.
Interesting, thank you. Anyone else, Brett or Francesca, Paul?
I would second the Ford comment from Tren. You just have a lot less options, it seems like, in Forbes to control weeds. And so you end up spending a lot more time spot spraying or hand roguing those out of those Ford fields. So that's a challenge. I've heard all the milkweeds are a challenge, but we hadn't taken that one on yet. Thought we'd let somebody else get some experience.
Yes, especially the cleaning, I think. Great, well, thank you. Here's the next question. Do any of you engage with government agencies for a contracted increase grow?
Yeah, I can we'll start that one. So we are participating in the IDIQ with BLM and have several small fields. I think we've got 22 fields with about 15 different species under contract right now. A lot of those are we're in our first or second year, so we have not provided any seed off of them yet, but they are in establishment phase.
Great. And Francesca, were you about to say something too?
We just have our one little field of a couple species with the National Park Service through Petrified Forest. And we've applied for some of the bigger BLM seed grout contracts and didn't get those. And I think we got the NPS one mostly because we had worked with them for this project through a grant first. And when it's really small amounts of money, they're able to pay to keep a field going much easier than doing a massive grow out kind of thing. But that's our only direct federal contract that we have at this point.
All right, thank you. This is a question for all of you. What types of irrigation setups are used in your grow outs? Specifically interested in overcoming challenges related to arid climates and drought conditions. And well, let's start with Paul.
Yeah, most of the work I've done with native seed has used flood irrigation. That has, lots of pros and cons. It works really well, especially if you have heavier soil that holds on to the water for longer. Sometimes getting germination on these really shy desert adapted seeds can be tricky, and you need to really convince them that there's going to be water for a while. And then once they're up, they don't need much. But germinating in sandier conditions through flood irrigation, which is something I've tried a little bit with collaborations at Rio Grande Return, is a lot more difficult, and you're going to see a lot more introduced species coming in and competing for that. And then, disturbing a native seed in the middle of its germination is a concern when you're cultivating by hand. So flood is an option that I've worked with, especially in heavier soils. I know a lot of people use combinations of flood and drip. And I expect that a lot of the other folks on this panel use a lot of drip delivered irrigation.
Great. Brett, would you go next?
Sure. So we predominantly use center pivot irrigation over the top. We do have some subsoil drip irrigation. I think the challenges are a lot like flood, except for with that tape being 18 to 20 inches under the surface, it's hard to push that water all the way up to the seed bed to germinate that seed. And so the ideal setup would be to have subsurface irrigation with a center pivot watering over the top to germinate it, but that's not really feasible. We like both. There's some maintenance that you've got to really consider in drip. And unfortunately, if all of ours was drip, it would be cost prohibitive to put it in to begin with. But, just a lot more maintenance as compared to over the top irrigation. We do try to put our nozzles down low to cut down on evaporation. But center pivots are easier. You have a better idea of what's going on. You can see it. And so both have their place. So
Thanks. Justin?
I'm a big proponent of drip tape. I put out 2 miles of drip tape on my tiny little property. And so the drip tape is affordable for shipping. It's really precise with delivering the water. It works under really low flow rate conditions. And so I'm actually, with a 1-inch line or a 3/4 inch main line, I can, water multiple acres utilizing drip tape. And so I also like the aspect of the different millimeters of thickness you can get on the drip tape if you're in an area that has some maybe some herbivory or animals would chew through that tape. They sense the water's in there and they get to it. It is really flimsy. It's cheap, but it's really, really easy to repair. I've also done repair of drip tape with just electrical tape if it's a small little spraying hole, or the fittings are very affordable. So I know in my fields the water is precise to each planting, and I can also use the spacing on different tapes to help space my crop. So when I'm doing my planting, there's no tape measure laid out. It's just a drip tape runs straight with a wetting pattern, and I plant right in the wetting pattern as desired. And so I like that drip tape aspect, and it's also used a lot in this area because we're mostly on well water here. And also with the drip tape aspect, I can plumb one crop together on one zone so that I'm not watering different species when they don't need it, or they might not want it. So one species together on one system, and it's super affordable and it's easy. Anybody can do it.
Interesting. Francesca?
Yeah, I can speak to this. So we use drip tape primarily in our fields, and which has worked really well for us. Yeah, and then it works really well for us. And for the first year, we'll have to use drip entirely, and then subsequent years we actually rely entirely on rainfall. We have a really good monsoon season here, and I guess it's also important to point out that we actually also use weed cloth, so we don't really it seems to help a lot with water retention in the soil. Yeah.
Thanks, Travis. Tren, I think you're last one for that question.
Sure. Yeah. So we use on our larger fields, we're center pivot. And then we also, on our smaller plots, we do some drip lines. And then we also have hand lines on some of those, 5 to 20 acre fields that we'll move around. They all have their pros and cons. I wouldn't say one's better than the other overall. I think it depends on the species, which one is best, and then also size of your field. So, but our southern farm is all drip line, and it's 40 acres. So we run a lot of line down there.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize That's a pretty large scale to be doing that.
Yeah.
Great. Well, our next question, speaking to the chicken and the egg dilemma, I have a pie in the sky list in trying to develop biodiverse restoration projects, but maybe I should be working on workhorse species only. How do we as consumers request for, quote, new species to show interest? Is it a contract grow ask? Who would like to start with that one?
I can take a stab at that one. For us, it would depend on scale. I mean, if it's a large scale project, we'd be more, in general, we would like a contract grow out type deal. But if it's a larger scale and there's some collection species and some grow out species on it, we can make that work one way or another. So I think it's really project specific. One thing for us is if we're constantly asked for a species, then we will put it into development. So the more people that ask us or inquire about it over time, industry will figure out how to provide it.
It's good to hear. Anyone else that would like to answer that question?
Well, I would say to also not forget to include IE in that and let them know, because y'all are working on all these as well. So if there's something of certain interest and it's not large enough to meet a commercial producer's kind of interest, that might be a place to start. But for sure, reach out to the industry, to the producers, and see if that's something that they would have interest in.
Thanks for adding that, Brett. And how about anyone else that would like to answer that question?
I'd say from a small producer where we do a lot of retail work. So often with our organization, we get so many questions where people call and are like, what should we put in our yards? And if we have a new exciting species, either in the nursery or a new seed packet species that we're really excited to talk about, you've really got to sell it. But people get really excited and love learning about new plants. So when we get asked to grow out contract species, we have our workhorse list of species, but there's so many fun things that we're constantly starting to grow that are new. And I think really selling it to the consumer when it's this smaller scale retail seed packet or a few pounds is really important.
Thanks. We can go ahead and move on to the next question. Can each of you discuss growing practices, seed collection methods, and cleaning equipment? How are each of you addressing maintaining genetic diversity in your plant collections? So we'll just let each of you answer that question, and whoever wants to jump in first. Oh, so if you don't see it in the Q&A, it's growing practices, seed collection, seed cleaning equipment, and genetic diversity.
Okay, some of these don't apply to me, but I'll just go through the list. Growing practices, I think we covered that. Seed collection, I did all my seed collection by hand, and that was scissoring the seed off at the stalk and trying to minimize excess material. That's how IAE took the seed from me. So I didn't have to worry about cleaning equipment, which obviously some other people can work to that, but I'm providing all of my seed back to the contracted grow and not cleaning any of it on my own. And then how are we addressing maintaining genetic diversity in your plant collections? So I guess that in my case, there's no other, that is a good question, because if that species is native to your area, there would be populations of it. We're trying to, I do have some grama growing close by. I'm mowing that down to terminate it before it puts pollen out and potentially crosses with my variety that specifically the seed was provided for me to grow. So it is something to keep aware of. And I think maybe not growing multiple accessions of the same thing, and then spacing for however your crop grows. So that's just me. Other people can jump in.
Yeah, and I might just add to that is you've received G0 seed, and so you're not like multiple generations of seed of fields, so that helps to maintain the genetic diversity. And how about Paul?
Yeah, let's see. I think a lot of these have been kind of, at least like growing practices. We've talked a lot about irrigation. I do a lot of hand seeding with that, and we've done a little bit of plug planting, but mostly we've been working on trying to figure out, to like experiment with IAE to find ways of effectively germinating seed the first time in the field, because it's less work overall, and is a little finicky, but is good. All the seed that I've worked with for native plant, for these kind of native wild plants, has come from IAE. So I'm lucky enough to outsource all the collection strategies to them, as well as cleaning equipment. So at some point maybe that I'm curious whether Francesca or some of the either the larger growers have their own stuff for that. And then genetic diversity, kind of same bit with that. I was growing G0 seed as well, and so that was kind of fresh off the bat. It would be really interesting to talk about strategies for maintaining kind of self-seeding populations on a smaller, on any scale really, but that may or may not cross with other populations, and whether situations in which that would be an acceptable situation or not. That's something I'm curious about investigating in the future.
Thanks, Paul. Brett, would you mind talking a little bit about the evaluation plots that we have
Sure.
with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the 7 production fields we have for IE, we have all the collections. So there could be 8 to 15 different collection genetics that we take, and we plant those, we transplant those individually, and then we kind of mix the seed that's left to plant the larger production field. But that gives an evaluation plot to go back and evaluate each specific collection and evaluate how it germinated in the greenhouse, how it persists. And so we feel like based on that, we've got a really good idea of what the larger production field looks like and how it's doing based on that evaluation plots. I think we may have lost one collection out of all of them so far, and so it's been pretty interesting to watch that and see how each one of those play a part, and how they express themselves differently right next to one another.
Yeah, and as long as you're on, maybe you could talk a little bit about any collection and cleaning.
Yeah. So as far as collection, we do rely mainly on groups like IE or the plant material centers in the States to provide our parent material. We'll then either transplant those or direct seed them based on how much seed we can get. Typically transplants. We'll produce that 1 acre field of transplants until we get enough to produce a larger production field. And then all different row spacings. Like I said, most of it under center pivot irrigation. And then I don't know if harvest technique was one of the questions, but we use combines and seedsters, flail backs, some hand harvest, and let's see what else. guess that's probably about it. We do swath some, anyways, we pick it up with the combine. But then after that, we take it to our facility here, we dry it down, and then we do have some cleaning facilities that separate everything based on size. There's screen cleaners, length separators, gravity tables, anything you can probably imagine, a lot of homemade stuff as well, brush machines. So.
Could you tell everybody a little bit more about the seedster? That's a really great piece of equipment.
Yeah, so a seedster's a lot like a flailback, except for it's got 3 brushes instead of 1. And so what it does is it sucks the seed heads up into the brushes, and then it only brushes off the mature seed. So one way that we maintain our genetic diversity in our seed mix is that we'll harvest that one field multiple times. So when we've got all these different collections, that may have different maturity dates, we're not just picking a one time and a snapshot of, this is when we want to go collect the seed. So we'll harvest it, 5 to 10 or 12 times in a year to collect as much genetic diversity in that bag as we can. And so the idea is it just lightly brushes that seed head, brushes off the mature seed, and then leaves the seed that's not quite ripe or mature on the plant for us to come back a couple of days later or next week to collect it.
Thank you. Francesca.
Hello. For growing practices, so far with our field, we produce all of the plants in plugs before we plant them out, and we've had really good success. It's been harder to get them to germinate in the greenhouse with some of the species, like Sprobolus cryptandrus was tricky. This dahlia we were working with was a little tricky. But once they're germinated, they do pretty well on drip, getting established in the field. For seed collection of the field, we do everything by hand, which with the size of our seed collection field is doable between staff and volunteers. And it assures that you're not worrying about getting the wrong plant when you're collecting. And then for our seed lab with cleaning, we have a few different pieces of equipment, but mostly we stick to just using like the hand screens and screen cleaning everything. We invested in a brush cleaner a couple years ago that's been really, really tricky for us to use. The seed comes out really clean, but it doesn't actually save us much time. And so we've had like a lot of trouble using this machine, and have talked to a lot of different groups about figuring out a trick if maybe we're doing it wrong, but it seems to just be kind of a tricky machine. So maybe we'll look into something else like a mid-sized seedster or something, because we love the idea of being able to have equipment for small to medium size seed cleaning that would just make things faster. But if it's going to be really loud and not save us any time, it doesn't seem to be super worth it. We then either send off our seed to be cleaned, like the BLM seed cleaning place in Oregon. We're sending like 500 pounds for them to clean from some of our wild collections this year. And we'll like ship off in bags to our contract, to the people that ordered contracts from us. And then genetic diversity has not been a problem for us, partly because it's all wild collected seed that we're using. For our PFO field, we have some extra spaces that we're still putting some of the wild collected seed that we're growing out in plugs back into the field, just because we have some space and some seedlings left over. But yeah, that seems to be, yeah.
Thank you. Well, gosh, our hour is rapidly coming to a close, and we still have a lot of questions here. So this is really exciting. Thank you everyone for typing in your questions. And Nora's question here has been up there for a while, and we might go, even though this other one, gosh, they're all so good. Let's go with Nora's. What happens on the back end of seed production? Are your seeds cleaned and stored in-house or sent elsewhere? How long are seeds typically stored before they're sent off to the partner or purchaser? Does viability get assessed in-house or sent somewhere? Somebody want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I can go first there. So as far for us, all of our cleaning is done in-house at all of our farms, and we also clean all of our wildland collections in-house and store them in-house. And then as far as the testing, we use a third-party lab. We work with multiple labs in different areas. And then each state has their kind of requirement on the testing dates. So we keep each species up to test date and send it out to the lab as needed.
Great, thank you. And it looks like we've come upon the end of the hour here. And I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you to all the participants who put in your questions. There were some great questions and it kept us talking for a whole hour. With that, I'll turn it over to Alexis, and there we go.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie, for moderating that panel, and thank you to the Southwest growers for answering all those questions. And thanks to everybody for joining us today. I'm just here one last time to give everyone a huge thank you, especially to our speakers and growers that joined us today, provided us with some informative and engaging content. It's been a really great 2 days, and I'm excited that we were able to pull this together for everybody virtually. There's been a lot of engagement with the speakers, engagement between everybody in the chat and on the community boards, which is really fun to see and watch happen. I know it's hard to connect when we're not in person, and especially when you can't share your video or microphone. So thanks for your participation and support. As I mentioned earlier, we will reveal the winners of the photo contest. We actually ended up with 3 winners because there was a tie for second place. So I'll connect with all 3 of you afterwards via email about receiving your prize. But the first winner we have is Talina, and sorry if I mispronounced that, Appling or Talina, this little frog friend here in some Pearly Everlasting. Our next winner is some pollinators on possibly what might be a rabbit brush, maybe, I'm not sure. Couldn't find this one to officially download if there was a caption. And then also Owen Dell with this picture of Twinberry. So congratulations, and yeah, I'll be in touch with you all soon. And then just a few last words. The fact that this conference started as a small regional event, but grew to include so many of you from all over the US and Canada, I think really just underlines the fact that plant materials are important everywhere. And it's important to get together to discuss and share our lessons learned and our experiences. And despite some challenges, I think it's wonderful that we've been able to come together on this virtual platform and meet as this broad group from across the continent. We've had nearly 400 attendees and 25 speakers join us over the last 2 days. So again, I want to thank Dr. Olivia Carroll and Doug Tallamy for providing their keynote presentations on pollinators in the Southwest and on the nature of oaks. So many cool plant, pollinator, and animal interactions to learn about. And then a thanks to our other speakers who presented on oak woodland and seed-based restoration, tribal native plant nurseries, seed balls and seed banks, climate change, plant material centers, and seed partnerships. I also really want to thank my colleagues that I've been working with on this conference at IAE for helping to plan, coordinate, and put on this event, including in the Southwest, Melanie Gesler, Maria Mullins, Megan Rabinowicz, and Ashley Wolf. And up here in our Oregon office, Tom Kay, Michelle Wyman, and Morgan Franke. I really couldn't have done it without this group of people. One last note, we do have yesterday's sessions recorded. They're up on Whova under the Wednesday welcome session on the agenda. Today's sessions will go up under Thursday's welcome session later today or tomorrow. And then the conference platform on via Whova will be available for 3 months. So you can continue to view those recordings in the next 3 months and also continue in the discussion topics and connections and make connections. And so I hope that you've all had some lively conversations in the last 2 days, because we really need to keep a lot of these conversations going on climate change, optimizing genetic and species diversity, engaging more communities and expanding our outreach, and improving our understanding of native plant material production, and more. I've already been seeing some few suggestions in the polls for additional topics to cover in possibly a follow-up conference. So thank you again, everybody, and have a great rest of your week.